Ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen and ladies, let's get into this. So, a couple of days ago, I made a video based on some information that someone put out there that was incorrect regarding diffractive elements in the new RF 200 to 800 f6.3 to f9 lens. So I thought that maybe I should do a new video to highlight a few things, obviously, that has come to light regarding the lens, as well as correct some information that I was given that was incorrect, and I will address that person that gave me that incorrect information in a future video, so look out for that. Anyway, the RF 200 to 800mm f6.3 to f9 lens looks a fantastic lens. It looks well built. It has white paint on it that is slightly different to the L glass lenses like I've got here. Here is the 100 to 500 f7.1 lens. So the colour is slightly different to that lens, but not that much different. And I thought I'd go through the aperture ranges in that lens. Now we've got a bit more information. So at f6.3 at 200mm to 268mm, that's what your aperture will be. Now that changes to 7.1 from 268mm to 455mm. And then f8 from 455mm to 637mm. And then it goes to f9 at 637mm to 800mm. To me, basically, it's sort of giving you the mindset that this lens at 600mm is an f8 lens. Very similar to the 100 to 400 budget lens that's come out for the RF in black. I've talked about diffractive optics, in short, called DO lenses, right? And I talked about the f11 600mm and 800mm prime lenses that have come out in the past. And obviously I'll show you an image on the screen to briefly summarise what diffractive elements are. Basically, they take an element, slice it in half, grate it at various angles with a laser on both sides of that element, and then light passes through it, and this has the benefit of allowing you to have a smaller element in the lens, making the lens smaller, more compact than the typical L prime lens. You know, so obviously the DO lens is about 40% shorter than a traditional L 400mm lens of the same sort of aperture type. So that's what diffractive elements do, and that's what they are. I was led to believe that there would be a diffractive element in the 200 to 800 lens, but that's been debunked and shown to be false. So I just want to put it out there that although I have talked about that in the previous two videos, disregard that information. I do apologise that I gave you the wrong information, and I hope you can forgive me for making a mistake there. So moving on, the lens is compatible with 1.4 and 2 times extenders. So the sort of zoom range you would get from a 1.4 is 280mm to 1120mm at f13. And then if you use the 2 times extender, obviously it would make sense that it starts off at 400mm, goes to 1600mm at f18. Keep in mind, when you're dealing with these smaller apertures, you're going to get diffraction in your images, and that's basically could lead to soft images. So I would highly recommend you don't really use extenders on this lens. Think about this lens as a lens you would use without extenders. And if you really want to use extenders, obviously I've done a bit of research, and if you start putting in an extender on this, like a 1.4, gives you 700mm, and it's comparable to the 200 to 800 lens with 1.4 on this. So if you've already got the 100 to 500, it's probably a good idea to get the 1.4 extended, then think about either selling this and getting the bigger lens, the 200 to 800, or keeping this and then getting the 200 to 800. You've got to remember, this is nearly £3,000, and in the UK this 200 to 800 lens is priced at £2,300. I think it's a bit unfair that people in the States are paying $1,900 while us in the UK have to pay a lot more, £400 more, which is a big deal. So if you already own the 100 to 500, it might be advisable and a good idea to get the 1.4 extender. You could probably pick that for about £450, £460. It's a lot less expensive than buying this 200 to 800 lens. But we'll get into that later. So let's continue on. In terms of image stabilization, basically the 100 to 500 gives you 5 stops, the 200 to 800 gives you 5.5 stops. There's not a lot of difference in there at all. So I don't think you're going to be losing out on stabilization. Now, I've just found out that the 200 to 800 comes with nano USM motor, right? It does not come with dual nano USM motors, as has been reported. I've looked on Canon's website to verify this. So basically, you do have a better focusing system in the 100 to 500, which is a dual nano focusing system. Basically, you've got 2 of them in this lens, while in the 200 to 800 lens, you are just getting the 1 nano USM motor in there. So keep that in mind, that while it's going to be pretty quick, and certainly quicker than STM motor, it's not going to be quite as quick as a 100 to 500. So the weight, obviously it's 2 kilograms. Technically speaking, it's 2 kilograms and 40 grams. But in terms of pounds, it's 4.5 pounds. It does have some weather sealing. I will put a diagram up so you can see that. It's resistant to dust and moisture, as say the 100 to 500 is. Minimum focusing, right, at 200 millimeters, it's 80 centimeters. At 400 millimeters, it's 180 centimeters. At 600 millimeters, it's 280 centimeters, and at 800 millimeters, it's 330 centimeters. And to be honest with you, at 600 millimeters, it's comparable with the Sigma Contemporary Sport lens. It's pretty much very similar to the Contemporary, which was 2.8 meters, and obviously the Sport was 2.6 meters. So very close to that. So I don't think you're losing anything there if you compare this lens to the Sigma lenses. Now we have 2 UD elements, ultra low dispersion glass elements in the lens setup, and 9 aperture blades. So that should give you an idea of the quality of the lens. We've got 17 elements, right, in 11 groups. So there's a lot of elements in this lens, obviously for the massive focal length that we're dealing with. Comes with a basic black lens hood, which is really good. Thank you, Canon, for that. Because if you remember, the 800 Prime RF f11 and the 600 didn't come with lens hoods, and I think that really annoyed people. So thank you, Canon, for introducing us with at least a black lens hood. Right, the filters you'll need for this particular lens is 95 millimeters. It's the same size as the Sigma Contemporary. Sigma do some really good protective UV filters you can put on your lens. It's called a WR protector. Get one of those. They're really good quality, and they're designed not to shatter if they get impacted, unlike other UV filters that will shatter, and those pieces of shards of glass, if they touch the front element, could scratch your lens. So I highly recommend the Sigma WR ones. They're expensive, don't get me wrong. You're probably talking £110 for one. I've got one on on my, or I did have one on my Sigma lens. I've got one actually on the 800 f11 lens that I own. So highly recommend you get some UV filter to protect the front. There is a black lens case for this lens, this 200 to 800, but I think I found a pricing in the US for $190. That's a lot of money for a case just for the lens, and it's just the basic black Canon case you can get. Obviously, we have the lens has lens function button on there and no focus ring. Now that's another thing that makes it not an L lens. It doesn't have a manual focusing ring. Now you can use the control ring and it's not clicked. So you can use that as a focusing ring, but you need to assign that to focusing, obviously. The control ring can be applied to many settings that are available, from ISO, aperture, all sorts of things, and obviously focus ring. So you can assign that and use it as a focusing ring. It's good that it's not clicked, so when you're focusing with that, it won't make a noise while you're filming, and you don't want clicking noises while you're trying to zoom in and focus at the same time, because obviously that will impact on the sound when you're recording. So that's a good thing, Canon. Thank you for that, because this 100 to 500 I've got does have clicking, I believe, on the lens. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear that? Now, Canon offer a declicking service that you can send the lens in, but I don't think it will be a cheap service, given the price of this lens costing me a ton of money. It's externally zooming, so it's not internal zoom like the Nikon 180 to 600 or the Sony 200 to 600 6.3. So obviously we've got no focus full-time manual ring on there. Unfortunately, that's disappointing, given the price you're spending for this lens. It's a lot of money. Again, I'll reiterate, I think the lens is probably a good pricing, would be between £1,500 and £1,800. In terms of America, you've got it priced bang on right. I think $1,900 is brilliant, and the fact that you can get it for that is fantastic. So obviously there are lens function buttons on there for assigning other controls and options on there, such as ISO and various other settings that you can do. Now, a lot of you guys will be comparing this lens to the 100 to 500 that I've got here. Obviously, this is externally zooming and it goes to 500 millimeters. The reason I got this over the 100 to 400 EF Mark II lens that I used to have was this is marginally sharper, and it goes obviously longer reach, and reach is king these days, isn't it? However, the image quality isn't that massive. If I'm honest with you, I think I'm getting 0.5% in terms of increased image quality with this lens. So just because it's an RF lens doesn't necessarily mean it's better than the EF equivalent that you've just sold, or you're thinking about selling. So just think about that just because it says RF on the lens, it doesn't mean it's vastly superior. In general, it'll be a tiny bit sharper, but what I have been noticing with a lot of RF glass is it's not quite as sharp as I would like it to be in the corners. Prime lenses is a different kettle of fish. You'll always have sharp corners, but when it comes to the zoom lenses, I've always been left a little bit disappointed that the actual sharpness in the corners isn't as good as I would like it to be compared to the EF variants I used to own. So that's just a little thing I wanted to mention. So a lot of people will be comparing this 200 to 800 with the 100 to 500 with the 1.4 extender and thinking, which is the better to get? Now, I've done a bit of research on this from trusted sources, and what I can tell you is the main differences from that make the 200 to 800 lens and makes it not an L lens are the following. Right, fluorite lens elements, it doesn't have that. Advanced optical coatings, doesn't have that, including air sphere coatings, doesn't have that. And fluorine coatings, no IR reflecting white coating, that's actually on the lens itself obviously, and no dedicated manual focus ring. Now I've already mentioned that. IS mode switch, so basically you've just got no options for mode 2 for panning and mode 3 for erratic subjects. That's not available on the 200 to 800. You've just got mode 1 and that's it. To me, it's not a big deal. Mode 1 I tend to use most of the time myself anyway, but that is something to note. Obviously it's not aimed at the professional target audience, it's aimed at the consumer, so it's not classed as an L professional lens. There's no case included. You would get that with an L lens. So that it doesn't quite fit into the category of an L lens professional lens. The fluorine coatings are useful for repelling fingerprint, dust, water, oil and other contaminants and making cleaning considerably easier. So those are the reasons I'm coming up with for you to understand what makes this lens not an L lens and what makes the 100 to 500 an L lens, and hopefully that gives you an idea of the main differences. Essentially, when it comes to the nooks and crannies of it, you've got better elements and better coatings on the 100 to 500 than you have on the 200 to 800. So it still makes the 100 to 500 a viable lens to use and use the 1.4 extender. In terms of image quality, I've gone to a trusted source again. He says the 100 to 500 is slightly sharper than the 200 to 800. Not by much, but a tiny wee bit. So that's something to take into account. So if you do put the 1.4 extender on the 100 to 500, I suspect you're going to get very similar quality images from both setups. So with the 1.4 on the 100 to 500, you're at 700 millimeters, and obviously that's more or less what you're achieving with the 100 to 500, and obviously you've got 200 to 800 on the 200 to 800 lens obviously, so you've got a tiny bit more reach. Obviously you can put extenders, 1.4 and 2x on the 200 800, but that's going to degrade your image significantly with such a massive zoom range. And one thing I do want to point out, just because you've got a massive zoom range doesn't mean you're going to get super duper brilliant images. Remember, the atmosphere works against you, will always be a problem, such as cold temperatures, heat waves, all those sort of things impact on your images, and that's something you need to be aware of. Just because you can zoom in from a long way doesn't mean you're going to get great results. You're better off walking closer, sneaking up on whatever you're trying to photograph and getting closer. Closer is king, not focal length. Now this is where a lot of people will debate with me and will disagree with me, but I've always believed that you need to get closer to your subject matter with a quality lens rather than rely on massive focal lengths. That's why I would have preferred Canon to come out with a 200 to 600 6.3 or a 5.6 lens, because I think that's what people are crying out for. This lens, I'm a bit on the fence whether to buy it or not, if I'm honest with you. So in summary, why should you consider going for the 100 to 500 over the 200 to 800? slightly sharper, better coatings, better build quality, dedicated focus ring. Remember, with the 1.4 extender, you're at 700mm, or if you use an APS-C camera like the R7, you're at 800mm. And one last thing to note is you're getting a dual nano USM motor in the 100 to 500. In the 200 to 800, you're only getting a single nano USM motor. Just remember that. So you actually get a better focusing system in the 100 to 500 than you do in the actual 200 to 800 lens. So, again, I'll give you an apology for the incorrect information I gave you regarding the diffractive optics that I was led to believe would be in the lens. But it's nice to know that it hasn't got diffractive optics. I don't really like diffractive optics. I'll just put it out there. I don't like them. I prefer solid glass over an optical element that's been sliced and modified. I prefer things to be natural, and that's why I prefer L glass over any sort of DO lens combination you can get. So that's why I decided to go for a 300 2.8 EF Mark II lens over the 400 DO lens. So I just thought I'd put it out there. That's why I decided personally to go for an L glass prime lens over a DO lens. And hopefully you found this video informative. Again, I will highlight that there are YouTubers out there that do like to slate other YouTubers and yet make mistakes themselves, which I think is out of order. But I'll discuss that in another video. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I would appreciate it. I've gone to a lot of length to research the ins and outs, and hopefully you found this informative. And it's a different take on these two lenses, how they compare, than other YouTubers and other commenters have actually explained and discussed. And obviously a lot of YouTubers have been able to test this lens for themselves, as obviously they're retailers and they have a good relationship with Canon. Unfortunately for us small little people, we don't have access to gear to review. Even when I went to Canon and asked could I borrow certain equipment, they said we don't loan equipment. But then it's very funny how other YouTubers, big ones that is, are able to get hold of you know, the equipment and get it in hand and do videos, and obviously they get the many views, and that's why they're at the top of the listings, and you may not even find my video. But hopefully if you do find my video, I would appreciate it if you do put the like, you know, click the like button. I would appreciate it, and subscribe if you do like my content. And I hope you did watch to the end. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day. Bye bye.